Hi, it's Word Nerd Wednesday, and I actually had a few ideas about what I was going to talk about today. I, at one point, thought I would talk about the words violation and violate, which is quite interesting. And then I thought, then I moved on to the sentiment of maybe talking about the word integrity and the word lie and the word charlatan, because I've been using charlatan a lot, which is actually a pretty fun word that comes from Italian, means a quack. But what I have landed on today on Word Nerd Wednesday is, in fact, a much different course, and that course is the words love and the word freedom. The words love and freedom, but the word love and the word freedom. Now, I've chosen these words because, or I suppose the word free. Obviously, freedom comes from free. So I've chosen these words because they have very interesting origins, and I think that the origins really add an element to what those words can mean in one's life and what those loves can mean to one's feelings. And I think there's just a lot of clarity to be found there. So, first of all, they're both really old, and so old that it's unlikely that we know when it first came into the English language. Oftentimes, when I say this word was circa 1200, that's the soonest that we know that it was documented, but a word could have been in use for hundreds, if not, thousands of years prior to that, prior to when language was written down, right? So we're always working with best information that we have. What we do know, and we'll start with love because that's the more popular one for some reason. Well, actually, we'll find the reason just now, right now. So love is from Old English, but that itself is from Proto-Germanic, lubo, from Old High German, lubi. Again, I'm pronouncing all this stuff wrong, but lubi, which means joy, actually, from Old Norse, Old Frisian, Dutch for praise, which is loaf, and then from Old High German to mean dear, beloved, and then from a Proto-Indo-European root word lobe or lobe, which means to care, desire, to love. But in addition, that Proto-Indo-European word needs to be compared alongside of a Latin word, lubet, that became libet, which means pleases, a Sanskrit word, lubyati, which means desires, and an Old Church Slavonic, it's some crazy thing like that, Old Church Slavonic, for dear beloved. The point being, though, that I'm making here is that the root word of love actually has more to do with desires. It's more of a love is more of a personal interest, right? In the original sense of the word. It meant what brought you joy, what pleased you, what you desired. And sometimes that can be mutual desire, right? Mutual joy, mutual pleasing. But at the end of the day, love is centered around feelings, around how one is in that moment, not about the nature of what you're doing, but about the sense and the sentiment that you get from it. So we find that love in its roots means to desire, to care and to desire, which is not negative in and of itself, but it's very interesting when then we go look at the word free and freedom. Now, freedom and the word friend, which I'll go into, I don't really need to go into because they have the same origins, but free and friend both come from a Proto-Germanic root, which is fria, and that means actually beloved and not in bondage. Interesting that those two things should be co-mingled. Maybe a former slave made up this word, probably, because something beloved would be your freedom, right? So from Proto-Germanic, fria, beloved, not in bondage. Then we go to the Proto-Indo-European word, which is priya, which who knows how that was pronounced, but that's just how it's spelled, so that's how I'm pronouncing it, which is priya, which means dear, beloved, from root pri, to love. Source also of Sanskrit, priya, own, dear, beloved, priate, loves, and Old Church Slavonic again, priyati, to help, or actually that's probably prijati, to help, and prijatelji, which means friend. And interestingly enough, in Welsh, reed, I cannot say this word, it's R-H-Y-D-D, reed, also means free. So it can get really interesting here, because when we follow the root of love down, it means desire, pleasing, what we care about. But when we follow the word free down, it means love. So I find this fascinating in our era of, or in the long-standing journey of humans to discover how to care for one another well, how to love each other well, how to create something that lasts and that doesn't destroy them, which oftentimes can be romantic love, right? A lot of us come from contentious situations between parents. A lot of us come from situations where we don't have both of our parents. A lot of us come from situations where we don't... Oh, one second. I'm back. I had a phone call. So, I don't even remember what I was saying exactly. But more that it's really interesting. Oh, right. I was talking about how this is like the real fountain, right? Not, you know, the tree of wisdom, the fountain of youth. This love, this romantic love, understanding love, having it, keeping it, making it strong, making it good, making it make you good. Like, this is the goal, right? For so many people. And so for that reason, I think knowing what we mean when we say that word ourselves is obviously important. Knowing what we mean when we say that word to someone else and what they mean when they say that word to us is also extremely important in order to create a longevity of mutual understanding. And in general, to know what we actually mean when we say these things is important, so that we know how to construct our conversations around the topic to best get at its meaning. So, when we say I love someone, it can also, and often does, mean I desire that person. And okay, we're not talking about platonic love at this moment, but which is interesting because Free addresses platonic love, and love and the definition of love itself can address platonic love, because sometimes you really want a friendship to last, or you really want a person in your family to be around, and that's a desire that also comes from what brings you joy and desire and pleases you. So actually, let me just throw that back in and not exclude it into the conversation. But when we talk about I love this thing or I love this person, we're talking about what they mean to us, what we want from that feeling, what we want because of that feeling, and what we want in regards to what we desire and what is important to us. What's interesting about that, though, is that it does not really account for, in its root sense, it doesn't have to, and therefore it doesn't necessarily or doesn't often account for what actually is called for in those circumstances. We see all the time from animals when something that they desire and their desire for that thing draws them into situations that are bad for them, right? You'll come home and your dog has eaten an entire box of chocolate, even though that shit is poisonous to dogs. So there's this sense of what is actually called for, what's appropriate for a circumstance, what's necessary, what is the best outcome that can come from a circumstance when we consider the best intentions and the uplifting of all things involved, right? Our desires can completely mow over the circumstances. What pleases us, what brings us joy, depending on how fixated we are on that thing in our lives, can make us blind to all other things, right? It's like what brings a totalitarian or a KKK wizard joy is not going to be good for me, right? But at the same time, that is their desire. That is what they want. So that sort of tunnel vision can prevent someone from the necessary recognition of all other things going on in addition to what pleases you. So then we go to the word free, though, because this word is the bomb, as is friend, just in and of themselves. Like, the things that they represent are dope. And then you go into the definition and stuff, and it's even better, because free comes from a Proto-Indo-European root word, pri, to love. Free is the act of loving. Love is the desire or the feeling. Love is the feeling of, I mean, how do I describe this? I described this in a previous time that I think I said it like, love is a spectrum. Everything is a spectrum. Everything exists along a spectrum, love included. And so we have the universality of love would make it less specialized, right? So romantic love is a specialized love. It's specific. That's why it's specialized, but it's also personal. It's also particular, and it's individual. Whereas universal love, the love of everything, the love of existence, the love of being alive, the love of existence. Did I say that already? The love of existence. That is inclusive. It's for everybody. It is available to everyone, and it is so multifarious that it is experienced by everyone in different ways, and yet it is the same love, the love of being here, being alive, being conscious, having memory, having the opportunity to even be aware of having a self. This all comes from one, free will, right? So this all comes from free will, and we know free means to love. So presumably freedom and friendship, because they have the same root words, invoke a different quality of experiencing what's going on around us. So again, love is specialized, and romantic love is specialized. Universal love is all-inclusive. So for instance, if you are interested in a romantic partner and yet there's constant tension between the two of you, or you need to change certain things in your life, but this relationship doesn't really allow you the room to do that because it's fixating you in some other way that takes all of your attention and doesn't allow you to contribute to that new aspect of self. This can be true of friendships. This can be true of business relationships. This can be true of romantic relationships. This can be true of familial relationships. So what does one do in that situation? One desires to be in a relationship that is not actually good for them, considering the circumstances. And if something isn't good for you in the circumstances, then it's also not good for whoever else involves themselves in that situation. Even though they may desire what they're getting out of that, it doesn't mean that it's ultimately for their best purpose, for their most integral experience, and for your most integral experience. So then it becomes interesting in the sense that if we base things on desire in that circumstance, we may choose to not do what needs to be done or change what needs to be changed in order to prolong our idea of what we want. However, if we're in that same context, in that same situation, we think of freedom and we think of friendship. We think, what does this circumstance call for? What is best for everyone involved? Not what do they want, but what do they need? What is necessary to this situation? What is called for here? What is shouting to and reaching out to be recognized that I may not be looking at because I'm fixated on my personalized, specialized idea of love? Then, when we consider freedom or friendship in that situation, it opens up a lot more doors for each of us to be good to one another. Not just have what we want, and not just have what we desire from one another, but to be good to and for one another, because sometimes someone's interest in you isn't good, okay? It might feel good to them. It might feel very urgent to them. Desire is that way. It's this very like heated, palpable thing. But the act of loving, to love, the act of loving is where we get the words freedom and friend. That's why we let things go when they're not good for us. Because if we truly want what's best, if we truly love a person and we want if we are in our highest, most exalted form of affection, which apparently is love, then we should want what is best for all parties involved. Sometimes that means in a relationship, whatever the nature of it, it's not you and it's not them together at any particular time or at that particular time. And I think that understanding what freedom means and friendship means is absolutely where we get sentiments like, if you say you love something, let it go. Or, you know, friends don't let friends, etc., etc., etc. There is a reason that these words are so powerful. And there's a reason also why love has been not only convoluted, but diluted and also broken down in a way that many people say the word to each other and are speaking about completely different things. This is true of friend too. I mean, the way that you describe what a friend is different for every person. And arguably freedom as well. I mean, it's all subjective. It's all language. These are all words. Every word I've spoken is something that we have all made up to understand an experience or a concept. Fully aware of that. I'm just also suggesting that in situations where you have typically indulged what you desire or what pleases you, instead to consider in those circumstances, in addition to those things, also open a few more doors. Consider what would be truly freeing in that situation. What would be truly friendly in that situation. And also, that is so important. What friendliness, like kinship, friendship, that kind of love, that is so important to take into account when we are upset with people who we care a lot for, right? Because when we have these relationships based on desire and joy, when it's disrupted, when the purity of the desire or the joy is disrupted, and we're in the middle of a heightened, tense conversation, it's often I don't know if it's well, clearly it is often, look at society. It's often in those situations that the free and the friendly go out of that conversation, right? Because people will say horrible things to one another, about one another, in a moment, out of desire to get something emotional across, when in that situation, ultimately what you should want for the person that you love and care for is for them to be good, even when they are messing up. Sometimes tough love is appropriate, right? Like blatantly direct, brutally honest, and not brutally vindictive. I mean, we'll get into honesty and at another Wednesday. But meaning like sometimes things need to just be laid bare. Sometimes the truth, it cannot be dressed up. It needs to be naked. And sometimes that is a form of love. Other times though, when things are laid bare, when we feel exposed and raw, when we feel vulnerable in a situation, then, you know, people seek to sort of like take full advantage of that vulnerability, where it's like, oh, you're butt naked now. I can more easily stick this knife in here because you're so exposed. That part, that's where we need to really consider freedom. Because I think it's better, this is my personal opinion, of course, as is most everything I've been talking about today in this video. But in my personal opinion, I would rather someone to be without me and better than with me and miserable. And so to not be fixated on my desire allows me to take in all these other aspects of the experience and of perspectives that are happening outside of my own, so that I can really assess in a mature way what is best for the circumstances and for everyone involved, in my opinion. Now, obviously, that's a conversation I'll have with another person because I believe in the maturity and autonomousness of others. But if we can't come eye to eye in that conversation, that's another indication that even though I desire that person to be in my life, it's better that I let them go. That's a greater act of love for me to let them go than for me to maintain a relationship out of an idea that is never made truly accessible. Okay, that is all I have to say to you today on Word Nerd Wednesday. Thank you for joining me, and have a good week. All right, bye-bye.